Isn't modern technology amazing? We keep finding new uses for it all the time. And you may be sitting there a little surprised that somebody of my maturity would be a little befuddled by the pace of technological change that is taking place. But you know, it is exactly in the area of befuddlement that I find the best use for technology. You know, when I walk out of a big box store and I can't remember where I parked my truck, I just pull out my key fob and press the unlock button, and I wait for the light to appear. There it is, over there. And as I lose my increasingly essential smartphone, I mean, I can have it with me, use it, and turn around and it's gone. I know it's got to be there somewhere. I just had it. I look upstairs in the bedroom, I look in my study downstairs, I go out into my truck looking for it. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go onto the cloud and I'll press that little feature, Find My iPhone. And a map comes up and a little glowing light, and by George, it is somewhere at our address. That's for sure. I know what I'll do. I'll click that button, Sound an Alert. And I click it, and a few seconds later, I hear a beeping. And I follow the sound, and there it is in the pocket of my my apron that I wear when I eat. I guess I stuck it in my pocket, and after I ate, I hung up the apron, forgot all about it, and there it is. Wouldn't it be really neat if there was an appliance that could access the Almighty whenever we need it? You know, they have things now, several different appliances that you can hook up in your home. Ken Wolf has one of these. And you go, okay, Google, what's the capital of Texas? And the thing answers, it's hooked online, and it goes, Austin is the capital of Texas. And it would be so cool if you had one that went to the Almighty, if you had a prayer. And you go, okay, Almighty, should I marry Nancy Lamneck? And the answer comes, yes, you should. And no, she shouldn't. The title of our message for today is The Search for God. What does the Bible teach us about seeking for God? Is there a prescribed way of doing it? Are there any guarantees that we can gain about finding Him? And when He speaks to us, how do we still all the other sounds and voices, the cacophony of the worldly voices that are competing with God for our attention? We're going to search for answers to those questions, as we always do, by searching God's holy word. And maybe in the process of searching His word, we'll learn a little something about searching for God Himself. Our text begins, while Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Paul is waiting for two companions, Timothy and Silas, who have been with him during his missionary journeys. A few days before, he'd been in Thessalonica, preaching the gospel, evoking the ire of jealous Jews who ran him out of town. He goes to Berea. He got a little better reception in Berea, but the jealous Jews from Thessalonica are following him. They stir up discontent. They throw him out of Berea. So he goes to Athens, and he's waiting for his companions to arrive at where he is. Now, Athens was the seat of the great Greek Empire. It's past its prime now. It's been the Roman Empire is now holding sway. But the city is still marked by this remarkable architecture from its glory days, including temples and public buildings, and not a few monuments to gods that they have worshiped along the way. Now, Paul sees all this, and it really goes against the grain of his Jewish upbringing. You know, one of the top 10 commandments is Thou shalt not create any graven images. Thou shalt not worship any idols. And he's seeing a lot of idols and a lot of worshiping going on to these idols, and it's kind of rubbing him the wrong way. It would have been the better part of prudence to keep his mouth shut in light of the fact that he's been thrown out of the last 2 towns he's been in, but Paul's on fire for the gospel, and he can't do that. So he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and the God-fearing Greeks, as well as in the marketplace day by day with those who happened to be there. As his custom was on the Sabbath, which was Saturday for Jews, he was in the synagogue. And there he found the Jewish people of the town and what are called God-fearing Jews. Those are Greeks, those are people attracted to the Jewish faith tradition, weren't born into it, but are attracted and are there. So on the Sabbath, he's going there and he's speaking about Jesus and his resurrection. And that's what he does on the Sabbath. The other days of the week, he goes to what's here called the marketplace. There it was called the Agora, and it was very common for people to go there. The Greek philosophers, they always like to consider the latest ideas. They would go there, and they would speak, and some obviously would listen. A group of Epicurean and Stoic philosophers began to dispute with him. Some of them asked, "What is this babbler trying to say?" Others remarked, "He seems to be advocating foreign gods." They said this because Paul was preaching the good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Well, we have to remember the Christianity hadn't been around very long, and it was just reaching these new places. So they're going, well, that sounds like a new god. We've got temples to all sorts of gods, but that sounds like a new one. What's he talking about? He's the latest rage in the philosophical discussions, and they want to hear about that. So they pick out a special venue where these great debates took place. Then they took him and brought him to a meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, "May we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we want to know what they mean." All the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there spent their time doing nothing but talking about and listening to the latest ideas. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "Men of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious." Kill them with kindness, I always say, especially when you've just been run out of 2 towns. Okay, so he's complimenting them right off the bat because he says, I just noticed that you've got a lot of temples here, a lot of monuments and idols that everybody seems to be engaged in worshiping. And he said, I even came across one temple to an unknown God. And he uses this as a leaping off place to begin his discourse. Now, what you worship as something unknown, I am going to proclaim to you. In other words, the God I'm going to proclaim is not hidden away beyond the sight, but is a God who reveals himself to his people, who search him out, who seek for him. He will reveal himself to them. And what he reveals is more expansive than any temple that is constructed to contain him, and any philosophical system that is constructed to contain him. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth and does not live in temples built by hands, and he is not served by human hands as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. God is bigger than we are. We don't create and sustain gods. Almighty God creates and sustains us. From one man, he made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the times set for them and the exact places where they should be. God creates us, not only in the beginning, when we are conceived and genetically have all these potentialities waiting to be developed, but he continues to create us after we're born through life's experiences, through environmental influences, among other ways. We are works in progress, and God is creating us. Beyond that, God determines the exact time we are born and where we shall live. We're not born when our grandparents were and didn't live there. We live here. God determined all of that. Now, if we believe that, well, let me put it this way. If we don't believe that, we're going to be just atheists. We aren't going to worship any God. If we think that all of this is a big accident, a cosmic burp, nothing more, well, and we're no more intellectual curiosity than that. We're just going to confine ourselves to more manageable day-to-day affairs. But if we do believe that there is a purpose for us, that we were placed at this place, in this time, with these gifts and talents and abilities, what is God's purpose for me? What is my part in God's plan? You see, the fact that God is the creator of us leads some of us to seek him out, to search him out. Paul says this. God did this, created us, so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. By the way, that line in our text is in quotation marks because Paul is quoting an ancient Greek poet now. And the line that comes after this is a quotation from a poet. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. You know, for a guy who's confessed that he's not much of a public speaker, I think he's being very smooth here. He started off by complimenting his hearers. You are clearly very religious. Now he's meeting them on their own terms, quoting their own poets. And he's confessing something very complimentary. We're all his children, not just the chosen people, not just this new body of Christians. The Creator has created all of us. We're all his children. Charlie Pride sang we were listening to some country songs back here. Charlie Pride sang a country song. Don't you know we're all his children, his next of kin? That's the way it began. No matter where you're going or where you've been, you're part of the family of man. We're all God's children, he tells them, all of us. The Creator creates us. We do not create him. We do not chisel a piece of stone or carve a piece of wood or fashion malleable metal like gold and poof, there's a new God, an idol for us to worship. God is bigger than that, way bigger than we are. And this gives us a hint about how we ought to search for him, to seek after him. You know, in the radio professions, they talk about the frequency over which we communicate. This is the frequency over which we hear God speak to us, through which God reaches us with revelations about himself. You know, if we treat him as a cosmic errand boy, God, here's my laundry list of the things I want, and expect him to fulfill all of our wishes, it's not the way it works. And you know, sometimes we speak that way. I've prayed and prayed about this, and God, I'm not getting any answer to my prayer. Well, no is an answer. Ask any parent that's got an unruly child. No is an answer. In retrospect, sometimes no is the best answer we could have possibly received. We are created to obey God and not the other way around. If the best that we can do is to create a God who looks like us, who thinks like us, he's certainly our political party. And And in the end, if all he does is look like us and think like us and affirm everything we're thinking, that's a pretty small God. God wants to create us in his image, not the other way around. He wants us to sacrifice our wills sometimes, our ways, so that his will can be done. And here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. If we approach God with this right relationship, in surrender to him, not as a cosmic errand boy who's there to do our bidding, but we're going to do your bidding as you make it known to us, that is when he begins to reach us. That is when we begin to hear him. It's like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz wants nothing more than to get back home, only to discover at the end she could have gone home at any time because she's wearing those ruby red slippers. And that was the trick. And the key to seeking God, to searching God, is to acknowledge a proper relationship. Full submission and surrender to the Almighty. That is when we begin to hear him. As it is stated on the front of our bulletins, a quote from Jeremiah, "You will seek me and find me." This is his stamp, his guarantee. You will find me when you seek me with all your hearts. When your heart's desire is to serve him and obey him more than it is for him to serve you and obey you, when you seek him with all your heart, then he will begin to lead you in miraculous, mysterious ways. I love that text Brother Horak read for our Old Testament lesson. We don't know whether to go to the right or the left. He says, but you will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it. Surrender is the key. First church I served wanted me to offer an invitation at the end of every message to extend what they called, what I called an altar call. That wasn't the style I was raised with, but, I conform myself to the pattern of practice of the worshiping faith community that I go to serve. I did that when I came here, but that's how it started out. And that's how I met Nancy, actually. She was raised in that church, born and raised, got away from it like many of us do when we're young, but she came back to church because she had just been through a devastating divorce. For her, it was devastating. We're singing country songs today. There's one, the guy says, I come from a long line of love. That's what she came from. That's all she ever hoped for herself, was a lifelong marriage to her marriage partner. She's fully capable of a committed relationship, but it doesn't matter sometimes. One person can't make a marriage if the other one decides to check out. Why anybody would decide to check out on Nancy is beyond me, but that's what happened. And when it happens, we are devastated by it. We beat ourselves up. It's just what we do. We feel like we're failures. We may not deserve it, but that's how we feel. And that's how she came back to church. And she came down the aisle during the invitation. And she was pretty, but that's not what I noticed. It's not. I'll tell you why. There was something on her face I noticed that that anybody would recognize who has ever been driven to their knees by circumstances beyond their control. And they're coming back to church because they're coming back to God. And they're saying, I've done the best I could, and apparently made a mess of things. And I don't know which way, if you're going to lead me to the right or the left, but I'm making a public testimony today that whatever way it's going to be, that's the way I'm going to go. And she surrendered herself completely. That look of surrender was on her face. The tears were coming down. That's what I noticed. And then I always like to say, God did start leading her. He led her to me. Now, I'm going to, actually I put that in the message, but I was going to take it out because I thought some people would say, That's a good reason to be an atheist right there. Surrender, sweet surrender, and perfect submission, as we sang in our opening hymn. These are the key. This is the frequency over which God communicates. And when we arrive at that perfect submission, that's when we begin to hear God speak and to guide and to lead us. When we're ready to say, whether it's to the right or the left, just give the word, and that's the way I'm walking. God did this so that we would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. You don't have to have a college degree. You don't have to have a bag of money to hear God. You don't have to come from an overprivileged background. Sometimes those things get in the way they hinder as much as they help. We all have access to the God and Father of us all, and perfect submission and sweet surrender are the key to hearing him. Please rise.